Hi, this is Robert Clinkenbeard and David Anderson with the Commercial Landscaper Podcast. We're going to take 20 minutes of your life to deliver some amazing content from accomplished leaders and business owners to provide you some value, to help you scale your business, to become a better father, and push yourself to higher goals personally. We hope you really enjoy these shows, and we really encourage you to share this with your friends and network to help share these messages. I'm super excited to announce a new partnership we have with Site Recon. If you're tired of measuring properties, the Site Recon platform fully automates the measurements so you can then focus on sales. Think measurements, think Site Recon. So this is Robert Clinkenbeard and David Anderson with the Commercial Landscapers Podcast. So we're going to do something slightly different today. David and I are going to have a conversation around leadership development. It's something that we both see as big challenges through the companies that we go in and coach and present with. So we just thought it'd be good to have a discussion today, and hopefully at the end of this session you'll hear some good nuggets you can take back to your business, or ideally bring us in to help you out. So David, welcome to the show today.
Thank you very much, Robert.
So David, I think both you and I experienced where we go into companies and, where companies will say, well, we're not growing, or there's all these challenges. We feel as though the culture is not there. And, a lot of the time when we dive in a little bit deeper, we find that a lot of people have been moved into that leadership role because they've done well at whatever role they were playing before, whether it be a sales role, account management, whatever role they played in the company, and they did a great job of that. And then suddenly the owner felt, the CEO felt as though they had to promote that person into a middle senior leader. But more often than not, they're not necessarily been given that training, that development, just to coach them along to leading other people. And they really struggle in that role. They feel as though they're failing. They're not necessarily want to step up and tell the owner, CEO that they need help. So what's been your experience to that, David, and what's your approach when you go into companies and look and try and peel back the layers?
Yeah, Robert, you're absolutely right. Many times it's in the growing companies. Companies are growing, and as they're growing, they need to add people. And as we add people, we know that that requires more time just managing people. And you're growing a company with a set group of people, and as they add people, it's just kind of natural in many cases to move those that have been with you the longest up into leadership roles or management roles. But what we don't do is train them. I've made this mistake. I'm a slow learner, as you know, Robert. So I've made this mistake several times. And, we as CEOs or C-level or, important roles, it's almost like, somebody else has to deal with that problem now. And 3 to 6 months later, we're realizing that, we've created more problems because the people that we've put into management and leadership roles, they were never trained to do that. There's this natural tendency of people wanting to move up the ladder, and they want their titles to change, and they want more money. But what doesn't get recognized or isn't given enough thought or preparation or process is actually training people to be leaders. And when we don't train our people as they grow with us to be leaders, it has a serious ripple effect. First of all, the work quality usually goes down. You see where your culture starts breaking down because, people that don't know how to lead have a hard time leading, can't lead based on your core values and things that you want to do. So, the takeaway and what you and I both see, and, as you work so much on strategy and I work on leadership teams, we see these great strategies put in place, but almost impossible to fully implement them because without the right leadership teams to implement, it won't happen, and it'll usually set you back.
Yeah, so true. I mean, I because one of the exercises or questions I'm asked all the time is, where do you start with going? If I go into a company, where do you start? And I said, well, you have to start at the people part, because unless you have the right people to execute on your plan, then you're not going to get anywhere. And I think there's almost I feel as though there's that unspoken expectation that when owners promote their team up into that leadership role, they feel as though that their role as leading the company should become easier. So, 6 months, a year later, when they feel as though they're having to dive back into the weeds, they're having to deal with all these cultural problems, all these other things, it was like, wow, what happened here? It's almost like they're blindsided. Is that?
Yeah.
You see that?
All the time. And again, I've done it in my own company, 23 plus years, more than once, of what it is. It's kind of like that. Oh, I got somebody else to handle that problem now. I need to, don't need to deal with that. And, where I work, excuse me, the leadership side is that whenever a CEO or somebody is promoting a person into a leadership role, don't walk into the office the next day and flick the switch and say, that's okay, this person's in charge now, I'm out. You should have a transition plan, and you should have a plan where you're coaching and bringing that person into a leadership role. There's all sorts of things you can do, from sending them to leadership classes. There's a plethora of them online now. Working with consultants and coaches, there's a ton of books out there on what to do, but it's really, really important that you put that leadership training program around your leaders and future leaders in your organization. I mean, it's kind of hard when you're a smaller business. I get it, but there's a reason that the Fords and the GEs and the big corporations spend a significant amount of money on leadership programs within their organizations to ensure that they are constantly filling the pipeline of people, to lead as they grow, and what they can do going forward.
Well, I mean, what does that look like? I mean, is that a transition plan of 2 months? Is it 6 months? I mean, what do you see as being the most successful that transition plan?
Well, for great question, but for an organization in total, I should think it should be an ongoing thing all the time. Right. We as leaders go hear speakers. Do you ever do, company-wide YouTube videos for people to watch in leadership positions? Do you have in our company, we have a book club, that are leadership books or other type of books that people do. So it should be a constant within your company. Is there some kind of quarterly program? Name of my company's off Madison Ave. We have a OMAU, university that with jokingly where there's different things that we offer. Going year round is a great way to do it. But again, as leaders in your organization, you got to be looking at your strategic plans and the growth and identifying the people that you see as future leaders. And there's no cookie cutter, Robert. I would say that's the biggest thing, because people are different. But I know you do personality assessments, you do all these type of things. That's what you should be looking at to get that feedback. And the biggest thing is get feedback from people that work for that person or are working with that person, from even their peers, and not to 100% judge if they're right or not. But it's important that we know what, people's weaknesses and strengths are, and where they need to grow. I'm sure that's, no different than what you saw in your company, in the past. How did you address it?
Yeah, I mean, I again, like you, David, I made a lot of mistakes along the way. I think I eventually got there, not necessarily through any formal training, but there was certainly a lot of exposure with a lot of the EO events I brought them along to. It was getting them involved in, the executive type forums. And I felt as though they truly appreciated being exposed to that and being around other peers. And it really accelerated their learning. Because even up until that point, I felt as though I was the one coming back to the company with all these ideas. And I think people got fed up with me throwing new ideas to them every single week or month. But when I started to get them more involved in that development, and then eventually once they, started drinking the Kool-Aid, then, I moved into more of that coaching type role where I was almost meeting them on a sort of a weekly basis. I'd try and allocate time with them, half an hour every single week, and just talk through some of the challenges they were facing. So it took that, that development to another level. But, going back to a point, you were making a minute ago. I mean, it almost starts off with that initial assessment, whether it be a personality assessment or some other evaluation of where your leadership is going. And then you're right. I don't believe it is a one and done type leadership development plan. I think it should be ongoing through the book. And I think it creates, if everybody's talking about either the same language or same direction, it just creates that tremendous alignment and you get so much better done. I give the analogy of, I'm obviously a big cyclist. So when you look at Tour de France or some other big bike race, you get so much more done if everybody's working in a peloton. They're all working rather than this breakaway cyclist that's usually, peter off after a few miles. But I'm a big believer in that, David.
Yeah, I totally agree. Two other points, if I can, and I'm sure you've seen this too. Leadership roles need to be earned, not just granted to. If you have somebody in your organization that feels that they're entitled to that next leadership role or a leadership role, it's not, don't do it. Don't do it. You just said a minute ago that there wasn't one thing, but I'm sure a couple punches to the face of things we've done wrong is a great learning too. If somebody believes they're entitled, don't do it. Look for the people that want to be leaders and are showing you that, hey, I did this, I read this, hey, I'm watching this. They're asking, hey, can you give me feedback on how I'm doing this? That's your true leaders. Constantly I have seen people with just, well, I've been here so long, so I should have this role or I do this.
So how do you deal with that though? When you almost feel as though you're under pressure, especially when there's a chance that person leaves your company. It sounds though from what you're saying, you shouldn't necessarily be pressurized into it, but is there another way in which you can address them potentially leaving the company?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tricky one. We all know, we all have this feeling, well, if this person leaves, I'm screwed, I'm in trouble. I'm going to be honest, a lot of times that's just the pressure we put on ourselves because we know then we need to find a new person. We need to train a new person. But I would ask you, Robert, how many times did that one person leave and you thought that it was going to be detrimental to the business? And 4 months later, you're like, wow, this new person I brought in is taking us to the next level. Or, wow, I didn't know how much drama that person was causing and what it was affecting and that. So you got to really dig deep. I mean, a lot of time it's our own fear as leaders that's just one more thing we need to deal with. Now, there's also ways to, if somebody's say, I agree, let's take the next 3 months, 4 months, put a plan in place. Here's a compensation structure that if you hit all of these things, if there's ways to put it in place to, motivate people to do it. So I think you can deal with it. The one other point I wanted to bring up too is, and Robert, you know who I'm going to talk about, but I'm not going to use any names. But what many don't see at the CEO or very senior level is when you add and you're growing, you need to change just as much as the people that are working for you. Your role evolves. You go from somebody who's doing things, managing, to a traditional leadership role of motivating, encouraging, the cheerleader. As you just said, you evolve more into a coach and mentor to the team that's running the day-to-day. You don't solve their problems, but you coach them through how to deal, through. It's not command and control anymore. It's not like who I'm talking about. I see the smile. Yeah. It's not, I want you all to lead the company and, do this, but I still am going to make every decision and I'm going to, do this. So, you as the CEO or leader of your company or SVP or whatever area, when you're looking to add people, you should be sitting down and writing your plan of how this new structure evolves your leadership position also.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And I know exactly the scenario you're talking about. But I think you're right, because when speaking to prospective companies or owners looking at coaching, and there's sometimes that resistance to perhaps paying those fees. But I think ultimately there's some benefit there because they can help you through some of those difficult conversations, whether you have it with the owner, whether it's with the leadership team, but just ultimately making through that transition or that change goes smoothly. Because if you don't do it well, it can ultimately cost you money, it can cost you people. So there's definitely a lot of benefits about surrounding yourself by the right people.
Yeah, Robert, if I can right there too, this goes to also bringing in somebody from the outside also into a leadership position. And a personal story of mine, at one point several years ago, I was like, okay, I'm going to kind of really step back in the day-to-day operations. And I brought in a GM to run the day-to-day business of the organization. And I didn't put a good transition plan in. And I literally talked about that light switch I said earlier that, okay, starting Monday, I'm out, this person's in. And within 3 months, I lost 3 of our 5 top leadership team members. And within 6 months, I had to let that GM go because I did. Yeah, it was 18 months of hell.
What do you think? If you were to put some type of a value on that, it may not necessarily have cost you any money per se, but I'm sure there was some knock-on effect from the turmoil caused by that.
Oh, absolutely. It cost me hard money because, as we all know, there's formulas out there. The cost to replace, especially a senior person, can be a full year's salary. By the time you find them, a lot of time you got to use a recruiter to find that level of person. And then you got that fee. And then you got to get them up to speed, which is at least 3 months. And then you have, where it plays the bigger havoc is the culture. When you get 3 top people to leave an organization, it sends a message throughout when 3 top people leave your company, it sends a message through your organization. What's going on here? Do I need to bail out? This is a ship in the marketplace. When you have to explain to clients that 3 senior people have left. So it absolutely has a direct, hard financial cost, but also the damage you do at a cultural level is pretty significant also.
100% agree. Well, how about the scenario where, for example, you're coming into a company, quickly doing an assessment of, they've already maybe got an executive or leadership team in place, but, very quickly through your assessment, you realize that it's the wrong team in place, or maybe there's 2 or 3, bad people, or just not the good fits. How do you go through that type of conversation, or how do you deal with that scenario?
Yeah, it's a great question. I will tell you, we both deal with this all the time. When you're doing strategy summits and, strategy planning, you see really quick who's the fly on the wall and who's an active participant. And so I just start every, consulting thing that I do, letting everybody know, total transparency, that I'm here to evaluate the team, to help them, but also to keep the leadership of the company up to date on, where there may be challenges. And it's not that that person needs to go by any means, but it's like, this person needs a lot more work. Here's the areas, here's the things. Maybe this person isn't right for the leadership team right now. A lot of times what I've seen, and especially in growing companies, and I know you do too, is that a growing company tries to stay within the same structure that they are today. Marshall Goldsmith has the great book, Triggers. Is it Tigers? Excuse me. And it's, what got you here today isn't going to get you to the next level. Yeah. And a lot of times it's when you're a growing company, you haven't really evaluated that. And just because somebody was in a leadership role, when you're, $2 million a year company, maybe isn't the right fit for a $5 million a year company or $10 million a year company, and that your organizational structure needs to adapt based on the growth of your company and how the company is evolving.
That's so true. It was even, I think there's a certain degree of loyalty. If somebody's been with your company for 10, 15, 20 years, it's, the last thing the owner wants to do is to pull the rug away from them with all that loyalty. But ultimately, if the company is not getting to the level you want it to, then there's definitely some tough conversations to have. I was actually talking to somebody yesterday who has a software company, and, they've been sitting around about that, 2.5, 3 million for the last 4 or 5 years. And I'm saying, what's what's the issue? And she didn't really know, but as I probed a little bit more, I think it became apparent that a lot of the leadership team were just cruising. They were just, they were in that comfort zone. They've been around for 15, 20 years, and it sounded as though they weren't a proper fit. So 100% agree that those people are not necessarily the right people to take the company to the next level, because she wants to double, triple in size over the next 4 or 5 years, and she's fed up cruising.
Yeah. And I have seen many times, people that are put in those roles, it's almost a relief. They're glad when they can go back to doing just what they really, really want to do. I mean, this is a classic within sales organizations, where you take a stellar salesperson and you put them into a sales management role, and they suck at it, and they're, not happy, and they want to be out. And, you have to handle it carefully, because I know you are, where the loyalty is important. But that doesn't mean there's not a role. I mean, you and I both have a person in our forum together that, had a president of one of his divisions for 20 plus years, and trouble new. And as soon as he made the changes, look at what he's doing now. He's at the highest growth level he's ever been. So it's, but that's why we're CEOs and not, friends. That's, you got to live with the title that you have. And we also know people who have had to let family members go because they couldn't go. It's just, either you take that role and run with it, or, it's okay to just stay where you are. And again, that's a personal decision. That's a lifestyle decision. Sometimes being able to have Thanksgiving dinner together is more important than.
That's so true. But a lot of those decisions are again helped through coaching and having those difficult conversations with the owner, the CEO, because there's very few other people out there that can hold that level of the company accountable. So I think that's where the outside resource coming in can help coach them through those types of decisions and what it looks like and that transition. So I've seen that happen a lot.
Yep. I too.
Any other nuggets, David, you think would be worthwhile sharing with our audience, just in terms of maybe as they're hearing us here, they're thinking, oh, maybe I should start thinking about leadership development. Maybe I've been guilty of promoting people into roles and they're struggling, but I don't necessarily want to admit it because I put them in that position. What other nuggets you feel as though you could share?
Listen, I believe that leadership roles are just like anything else. You can't become a welder without training. You can't become pick the things. You can't become in my business, you can't become a creative person using all the software without getting trained on the creative suites and softwares that we have. If you're an SEO person in my business, you got to get the Google certifications. I mean, you can just go through industry after industry where you train your people to go better. But sometimes, a lot of times, we just think, oh, well, they can manage these people. They can be leaders without any training. And it's just not that way. And even as CEOs, I mean, not only through EO, but I have mentors, I have coaches that help me because I need to be trained. And you need to think about leadership in your organization. Even you at the CEO, senior level, owner, co-founder level is, man, what certificates do I need? What training do I need? What should I do, to handle these, all of these things? You wouldn't hire a payroll expert without knowing that they know how to do spreadsheets and are trained in that. I would just evolve your mindset to know that leadership training, coaching is just something you have to do, just like you train other people to do other things in your organization.
I agree. I was actually going to make that point about the CEO levels because I think both you and I, we both got into starting our business. I don't think we quite realized where it was going to go. And, neither have us were trained in that, leading a company right from the get-go is something that we've evolved into. But I think we have recognized that we do need help and put our egos aside. And we said, hey, what can we do to better ourselves, whether it be through EO or all these other different programs out there. And, it's the same with other CEOs, put aside that ego, and yes, you've promoted people into those positions, but let's figure out what we need to do to develop them. What do we need to do to train them to fully fulfill that role and effectively take the CEO out to a point where they're working on the company from that 30,000 foot level, and let people that you promoted effectively lead the company on a day-to-day basis.
Absolutely. It's a saying we say all the time. You got to be working on the business, not in the business every day, to do that. So I fully agree. I'm reading a great book on leadership right now. We'll throw out there, Robert, for people to hear. It's called Ego, Authority, and Failure. It's by Derek Gaunt. Great book. It really talks about the evolution of leaderships and traditional stereotypes of command and control leadership to, leading with empathy and vulnerability, and that. It even talks a lot about how the U.S. military is using it, and that. I think it's an excellent book to do. And Robert, I know going through you, you can provide a ton of books to help. There's a ton of videos out there. Extreme Ownership by Jocko, one of our both personal favorites.
Yeah.
Get online, watch every podcast or video he does. If that doesn't motivate you, I don't know what will.
Yeah, especially seeing him in person, Dave. You remember that, and just how such a huge figure he was in terms of just his presence.
Yeah, exactly. He can kill you just looking at you. I know he could.
It's one of the few events I've been to where it's just like deadly silence.
Yeah.
Listening to him every single word, and it meant something. So,
we did that on the deck of that aircraft carrier in San Diego.
Yeah.
That was one of the most amazing events I've ever been to.
Yeah. No, I agree. There is so much content there, and I think both you and I could definitely direct people towards where to look for that stuff or what books to read. But David, this has been I think been really helpful today. So and just remind the audience if they want to get in touch with you directly and ask you some more questions about some of your leadership development coaching you do, how would they do that?
Well, obviously they can get it through you too. Going to Robert's website. I'm on there. I do a lot of work with Robert, and then there's you can also reach me. My website is dwaleadership.com. You can get me there. You can reach me directly through there. But I really enjoy working with Robert. I think we do a great 1-2 of the strategy and, really putting your company on a growth path, and then just making sure you have the right people to get there. I mean, it's an old saying, but without the right people, it's not going to happen. So, but you got to train those people to make sure that they help you achieve all the goals that you need to.
Yeah. And even expand further, the right people and doing the right things.
Yep, absolutely.
We can definitely help them out. So, David, really appreciate your time today. Thank you for sharing your nuggets. Yep, 100% agree. We definitely work well together, and appreciate your time today doing this podcast.
Thank you very much, sir. Have a great weekend.
Okay, take care. Hopefully that was pure dead brilliant for you today, and you got some great takeaways for your business or your personal life. This is Robert Clinkybeard along with David Anderson, and we'd love to get you and your friends to join us in our future journey. 2 quick things before you go, listeners. Check out our website, commerciallandscapers.com. You can subscribe, you can share with your friends, but more importantly, check out our new sponsor, Site Recon. It's going to make your sales process, your estimating way easier, so you can spend more time in your proposals. Thanks everyone. Cheers. Bye.